So I've got my transcription and I'm going to try to play it with the recording. That's going to be the first level. See how that goes. It's extremely fast. I don't think I'm going to be able to play it so fast. So let's see. Let's give it a try. Okay, so nowhere close. Need some practice. So I'm going to slow it down. Okay. So one thing that you'll notice when you're trying to sing along to a recording is that, especially something like this where, I mean, it's at 300 beats per minute, it's extremely fast, is that there'll be some moments where the performer is playing a little bit ahead or behind the beat. And what we want to try to do is, if you really like that if you really like the performance, like you like the song, you should really try to mimic that, because that's, even though it's a little detail and even though it's not right on the beat, that's kind of what makes the music, that's what gives the music some natural feeling, makes it really nice, gives it this human element, which is really important in music. So like, even if I'm looking just at this solo here, this John Coltrane solo, there's a part right here where this isn't exactly played like that. He plays this note maybe a little bit earlier, and same with this note a little bit earlier. So we're going to listen to the recording and we're going to try to figure out exactly how he plays that section. Or even before that, even this part here, where, I mean, I've wrote straight in my chart, but it's almost like a triplet. One triplet. It's like straight eights that are kind of dragged. So it's like 1 and 2 and 3. So there's a little bit of a nuance there. So let's listen earlier for that, and we'll also listen for the other one, which is here as well. Right. So it's not just 4/8 notes. It's actually a little bit more than that. Let's not figure out exactly what's doing it. Let's just mimic exactly what we hear him doing. So let's just try to really internalize it by mimicking every time. Let's try once more. Let's try once more. So it's like a little rushed going into it, and then it's a little bit slowed down here. So like these notes are a little rushed. This C comes a little early, and then it's a little dragged, and it's almost like a triplet that way. So let's do the next phrase too. So it's like, it's almost like this G flat comes on the beat, and it kind of, maybe it does. I mean, there's however you really hear it. I mean, I kind of hear it as being a little bit early, so kind of like really swung, but really early. So let's try both ways, and let's see if we can and then the third time, let's just mimic and learn it the way that he does it, without knowing exactly what it is. Yeah, so I think being on the beat seemed a little late for me, so let's try just a little earlier. So let's try it the way that I've written it. Good. So that was closer, and now let's just try mimicking exactly what he did. Yeah, so what's going on there is he seems to be playing this G flat just a little late, and then the next phrase is a little bit slower, but kind of accelerates back into time. So let's try to listen for that, and let's try to mimic that. Yeah, there we go, right on. So that worked for me, thinking about it that way. So that's kind of what you have to do with these transcriptions, is you have to really get into these details, what's going on rhythmically. Also here, there were some times where like the pitch wasn't entirely clear, his intonation wasn't super clear. Let's check out some of those times. So that would have been all of those times that I wrote a quarter flat in here, actually, just because I wasn't sure what the best way to notate that would be. But I'm pretty sure it's a G. It's not really a G quarter flat, but it isn't exactly G the way he's playing it. So let's listen to that part too. All right, here we go. So and that it's like it's a little flatter than that G. So let's try to mimic. Maybe that's a point where you either want to mimic the performer, or you want to say he intended to play the G and he just didn't have maybe enough air, or maybe he didn't quite execute it properly and it ended up being a little flat. So here's where it's up to you whether you want to make that G flat and sound exactly like John Coltrane, or if you want to actually play like a regular G and maybe sound a little cleaner than John Coltrane. So it's up to you what you want to do there. So let's try mimicking just that G flat, and then we're gonna try doing it. Let's try mimicking that G and playing it a little bit, singing it a little bit flat, and let's try doing it also by singing like a regular G. One, two, three. So yeah, somewhere in between, right? So that sounded like exactly what he was doing. Let's try doing a regular G. So all right, let's try that. Sounds sweeter for me, I don't know. It sounds, I mean, again, a really small detail, but sometimes certain kinds of music, especially when we're imitating singers and like sort of blues patterns and anything that's purposely kind of in between pitch, portamento, that what we were talking about in lesson 7. Sometimes there we want to try to actually mimic the singers and actually try to do it the way that they're doing it, or mimic the violin or whatever instrument is doing the portamento. We want to try to mimic it because we consider it an important part of the performance. Here, I don't consider that being a little bit out of tune as important. I think that's just a consequence of a variety of factors. Could be his reed, maybe, who knows. Okay, pretty good, not very clean, but let's try mimicking it. Close. Okay, that's about I think as good as it's gonna get. I think I'm gonna let that sit for a bit and maybe start working on the second level. So if you want to play a melody in a different key, the first thing that I would recommend you do is actually memorize the melody. Try to memorize the melody. If it's really long, it's going to be hard to memorize. Otherwise, I think you'll be able to memorize it. So I think this solo is short enough that I think I will be able to memorize it. And I mean, I remember a lot of it from when I was learning it. So I'm going to start and just see how much of it I can play by memory. So without looking at the music, put the music over. So it goes. Okay, so aside from one little phrase, I've pretty much actually memorized the whole thing just from learning it and trying to work it up to speed. I mean, whatever key you want to learn in, if you want to learn in all 12 keys, maybe it makes sense to do it in a sort of systematic way. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to try any random key, and I'm going to see if it's easier, how hard it is to learn it in that key. So that was an A flat major. Let's do it in C major. It's far enough away. So the first thing was there. So I remember there was a lot of stuff revolving F minor. So there's going to be a lot of stuff involving A minor here, like there's going to be stuff like that in the solo. So let's start. So and then we have these weird chromatic things. Is that what's going on? Yeah. So it goes right away to the 2. Every time. Not too bad. Okay. So I could go through and learn it in a couple more keys, but I don't think that's entirely necessary. I think I'm going to jump right ahead to level 3, which is going to be very, very hard, and that's going to be singing this solo. So here's my first attempt at scatting the solo. I think this original key is going to be a tad low for me, but I think I'll be able to do it. And yeah, it's going to be really slow, and I'm just working on intonation now. I'm singing the notes correct, and I'm going to just see which things trip me up. I think it's going to be really, really rough, and it's going to be really slow. So it's going to need quite a bit of work. But let's see. I'll give myself an A flat major chord to start, and I'll even give myself E flat. So bum bum ba da da dum ba da 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 hum bum 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 da 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 dum. That was not da 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 dum ba da dum. Da 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 bum 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 da 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 da. Yeah. Okay, so pretty rough. I think I'm gonna have to work on it phrase by phrase, and then maybe 2 phrases at a time, and then maybe like 4 phrases at a time. Some of the parts went okay. Some of the parts were pretty rough. It's low too, so maybe I'm gonna, like, I've already transposed it in C major. Maybe I'm gonna be working on it in C major. So that's gonna need some work. Okay, so I've done a bit of practice. I'm going to try singing the solo again. I'm going to try singing at about half the speed of the original recording. Okay, so that's about as good as that's going to get without more practice. I could practice for like another hour or two. I mean, this is already taking me like 2 hours to get this singing together. The singing is really hard, but I think that would just be just making small improvements to the pitch. I mean, during that practice time, I really felt like I was actually starting to hear the harmony behind the song and really starting to hear these things, really starting to hear them more accurately and actually be able to sing some of them and realize what my mistakes were. And I was fixing those. So I think more practice time isn't going to be very beneficial for me. It'll just be mostly polishing this, making it, maybe I could actually work on the last phrase. The last phrase was pretty bad. But aside from that, I don't think it needs, for me, I think that's as far as I want to go on this high level. I'm also not a vocalist, so I don't care to make it sound like a vocal piece. And I think maybe that's also another reason why this is a little hard for me. It's very fast. I mean, I think I took a reasonable tempo. I took it at half the speed. Imagine trying to sing this at double that speed. I don't think, I would be very impressed if somebody can sing that so fast. They must be a singer. I mean, you'd have to have some sort of vocal technique to do that for sure. So by going through the 3 different levels, the surface level, the second level, and the higher level, I feel like I've really internalized this solo and some of the content in it. So I've really learned a little bit about some of these phrases and a little bit about how they sound over the harmony. And I think that's something that will eventually come out in my own playing. And if I were to transcribe a bunch of solos from John Coltrane, from the same era, the same disc, let's say, I think I would start to really adopt his style and his vocabulary. Because especially when you do the higher level, not only are you just playing this on your instrument, but you're also committing it to your mind's ear. You're also thinking about the way it's going to sound, and you're remembering that, and then you're executing it. So it's kind of like learning a song in that sense. When you, like, if you think of a really easy song that you learned when you were a kid, you still remember that song because you learned it this way. You learned it by listening and by mimicking. So even though that seems like the most basic way to learn something, that's actually probably the most beneficial for playing music and for learning, especially for learning like jazz music, learning this kind of language.